Hi, this is Tamika with Create a Generational Love Cycle. Good morning to you. It is 9:35 in the AM here on the West Coast, April 18th, one day after celebrating Easter, if you celebrate Easter. And for the past few days, I've been a little on the weather. I did a COVID test yesterday, home COVID test, and it came back negative. Grateful for that. Hopefully, it continues to stay negative. I feel like I'm on the upswing. But if you're in the medical profession, a nurse, a doctor, you're always kind of hesitant to you kind of stay very observant to your symptoms, and you don't even really want to say you're on an upswing. You just kind of monitor your symptoms, and you'll know when you're kind of out of the out of the cold zone. And I remember the past 2 years, we just been talking about COVID, 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 COVID. If a cough, a sniffle, you're like, COVID, it's COVID, and even my brother, we were joking that you don't even want to say the word. You just want to say it's a C, not even the 19 in it. As a child, it's like, that's all you thought about, oh, I got a cold. Then when the flu came out, oh, do I have the flu? Now the COVID, and it's like, okay, do I have COVID? But anyway, other than that, just really tried to relax over the weekend. Sunday, yesterday on Easter, we celebrated Easter. We had communion. My husband got the crackers and the grape juice, and then we actually watched one of the DVDs about Jesus, his story. And as you know, as I talk about this, I just want to remind you, because this is one of the things I'm going to talk about, is that for me, it's not about religion. It's more about spirit, and it's more about truth. So I'm going to share a little bit about my spiritual journey as I talk about one of my mother's life principles. And I believe this is number 13, and I will make sure I address it as such. It may actually be 14. I've been, over the past few months, since the beginning of January, I've been sharing with you these treasures that when I was 14 years old, I I stood up in the dining room of our home in Venice, Illinois, and I was overcome with just joy. There was an energy that just really just kind of overcame me, and it was when it hit my conscious level that I realized that I was so grateful that my mother taught us values. She taught us principles. And it was up to us to listen. And I chose to listen because my ground was fertile as a child. Growing up, my first introduction with pain was when I reported my father abusing my mother to one of his family members. And basically, I was put on trial and told that I had no right to share what was going on at home. And that was my understanding, my first introduction to pain. Now, some may argue, and I may chance it, that my first introduction was probably when I was in the womb, when my father, because my mother said shortly after their marriage, he went from saying sweet things, doing whatever she asked, to really, not doing what she asked, and telling her that it was her job to get in the kitchen, and really starting to be mean to her, saying hurtful things, and started hitting her. And so my mother left that marriage with three children under the age of 5, and we traveled to Illinois via Greyhound. So from Memphis, Tennessee to Illinois. And shortly after our move to Illinois, we stayed with a family member that I was introduced to childhood sexual abuse. And so for knowing that it was wrong, but for years I kept it a secret. And I don't spend a lot of time talking about what I had been through, because really it's more about what got me through that experience, what I learned as a result of that. That's what I've tried to focus on throughout my life. I only share my story because I want people to see that I have been through a potentially traumatic experience. And it was by the grace of this higher spirit I call God. My mother called it God. I adopted that too as well. I've used infinite spirit, I've used higher power. I've even just said spirit, that shortly in the midst of amid my abuse, I there was a relationship that was forming between me and nature. Even in the back room of my the family member's home, I just felt like there was something out there that really loved me, even with what I was going through. And so shortly after The Secret was out, it was about 5 years, I I just got the urge to look outside my bedroom window, and I said, I want to be aligned with nature. And so a series of events occurred where I got a copy of the King James Bible. I believe it was my aunt that I was in church and she said, take it. They were given Bibles. And so I got it. And for the next few days, I laid on my multicolored shaggy carpet and I absorbed the Bible. I gobbled it up, just from front to back to back. And I remember believing there were some really good stories in the Bible. And at one point, I tried to teach my stuffed animals what I had learned, calling myself being the pastor, because by that time, my mother we were going to church for a short time. And at some point, we stopped going to church. And I had asked my mom, well, you don't know, but I'm telling you, I asked my mom, why did we stop going to church? And she at some point told me that God is not in a building. He is in our heart. So I want you to hold on to that for a minute. God is not in a building, He is in our hearts. And so when she said that, there was still, I think, this desire to be a part of church because my friends were going to church, the friends I had in the local area. Family members were going to church and often made comments about us not being into church, something else to add to my family and something to talk about. And so I want you to hold on to that for a second. So some other things happened. I received a copy of, I received a bookmark. I was actually walking through the house, and I think I was going through my mother's room, and my mother handed me a white bookmark, and I just looked at it, and I was like, well, okay, a white bookmark, and then I just happened to flip it over, and on the back of that bookmark was the Lord's Prayer: Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And so I just immediately dropped to the floor on my knees, looked up at the clock, and just practiced saying the prayer over and over again. And I looked up when I had it in my heart, inside of me, in my fertile soul, and I had memorized it within 15 minutes. And then sometime between in that state of the aftermath of the abuse, somewhere up in there, I started looking at Jesus because I don't remember looking at it over the family member's house. I remember looking at it at our home when we got our home. And often I was plant myself in front of the television. Often it was the floor model TV that we had in the dining room. And I observed a man that was unbothered often by what people said about him, that he was poor, that he loved people, that he saw people's heart. He knew what was in their hearts. And he didn't take credit for the miracles that he did. He often pointed to the person, said, it was your faith that caused you to heal, that enabled you to heal. And often, even over the past few months, I believe everything that's happened, even though I thought it was allergies, I was sneezing and just watery eyes in my ear, um, symptoms associated with allergies, that even getting that, because I hadn't been sick in almost 2 years, or at least had something, even getting that, I was like, I need to get past this. I need to be healed. So I rested the weekend and I had learned about the importance of rest, the importance of drinking water. I drank a little green tea. And he said, it's your faith that healed you. And so I admired Jesus. And eventually I would pray and that I wanted to seek the truth. And other prayers led to, asking God for stuff and actually praying to see the innocence in people. Because I saw things and it can take a toll on you, whether we believe it or not. When you're seeing people doing things, when they're criticizing others, when they're hurting others with their body, their mouths, that it can take a toll on you and you could begin to see evil and focus on evil more than good. And so for some reason, I believe that God is in all of us. He said that he wrote his laws in our hearts and our minds, that even though I was not quoting scripture, there were seeds that were sown in my ground, that fertile ground that had experienced confusion, betrayal, resentment, vengeance, shame, anger, that I was fertile, that I wanted something that knew about life and could guide me through my activities, which when I look back at my life, I feel like that's exactly what happened. There were things that I had put myself into that I was told, okay, you can go. In a relationship, I remember sitting at the table and at that time my boyfriend was not there. And I remember hearing the voice that if you are going to leave, leave now. And I mean, the food that I had picked was just so gross to me. I didn't even feel like eating it. This matter of fact voice that I had heard before, even when I was in the Memphis apartment and some kids had put me in a dark closet and I was pounding and pounding on the door. And I remember hearing this matter of fact voice that said, be calm, sit down on the floor, and someone will be in to rescue you. And so I stopped banging on the door and yelling. I sat down crisscross style. And within a matter of probably seconds, my father walked in and let me out of the closet. When my mother told me that day that God is not in the building, he is in your heart, I wanted to seek a relationship with this higher power. I wanted to know this higher power. And I felt like I was protected oftentimes by this higher power, going to school in relationships. And I'll share some of that on my YouTube channel, that I really feel like God was with me. And even when times when I feel like I question whether God is with me, there are things that will happen that I'll feel like he is there, because every good thing comes from God. Whether it is your children doing what you ask them to do, whether not having as much work that day when you're not feeling your best, every good thing comes from God. And so I believe, just like Jesus, God looks at our hearts. And it's not about what you have, what city you grew up in, what family you grew up in, what your literacy level, if you can read or write, if you can dance, if you can sing, whatever gifts and talents you may have. God looks at the heart, and he wants that humble heart to desire the truth, to not get so fixated on the name that we call this higher spirit, but to be more about a relationship. It's not about your stance. Are you crisscross? Are you outside in nature when you pray or when you talk to this higher spirit? But in the state of whatever you are, what is your heart? There is something out there, and I've talked about it before, that makes the universe, the earth, rotate around the sun, that keeps all the planets within their aligned position, that keeps the oceans separated from the mountains, and brings rain when the soil is dry and needs that nourishment. That no matter what has happened to you, there is a higher power out there that loves you, that wants a relationship with you. It's not about, well, I'm not in the right church or I'm not with the right pastor. Do you have a humble heart that wants to be guided by truth, that wants an inner peace? Because throughout my abuse, I slept. I didn't even know that being abused as a child sexually, the one of the consequences is that you have nightmares. My mom would tell us that you are in control of your dreams. There's so much truth. Even I had gone over the principles that she taught us yesterday, and I came up with over 30, and not even the one I just said, that you are in control of your dreams. And so a lot of those consequences I didn't have growing up because I had this faith and belief that my life was more than my abuse. And a higher power loves me and knows all and sees all and is faithful and is just and is everywhere I needed to be. Again, this isn't not a call to religion. It is a call to our source, that I believe a lot of the issues, a lot of the pain that we have is because of out of alignment with our source, with our true nature. And I know there are people who have done stuff that have been in the church, and you may have been abused by somebody who was in the church or claimed they was of God. One of the persons that misused my developing body was a deacon in the church. But as I've said as a child, do not be deterred by the messenger, but listen to the message. Just because somebody else act that way doesn't mean that is true. That is the way it should be. So I encourage you, as part of to create a generational cycle of pain. To create a generational cycle of love, breaking the generational cycle of pain. To ask yourself, who is my source? Who am I to have a relationship with? Because my mother would tell us, and I'll share this another day, we are all accountable for our lives. Even the ones that have projected their pain on you, they are accountable. But don't let what they did deter you from the truth, from seeking the truth, from accepting the truth, from being aligned with the truth and our source. Every breath we take, every heartbeat that pumps blood throughout our body, every organ, every cell, something gives us life and wants us to live and wants us to fulfill our divine purpose. And that is the message of hope and love that we share with our children. And that is a legacy that we leave from the inside out, because that's where our truth is. It's on the inside. And we bring it out of us when we believe that there is love. This is Tamika Chambers with Create a Generational Love Cycle. You can find me on YouTube at Tamika S. Chambers, Twitter, Instagram, and on my website, my blog, for more information about how you can leave a generational love cycle.